want to welcome you to our worship service today. We're going to focus on the touchstones of the Unitarian Universalist tradition. I am Bud Friend Jones. With me is Doug Wadkins, our senior interim minister, and Beth Miller, associate minister. Klaus Obermeit, Doug Caldwell are in the production booth back there. And we are worshiping together as the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Sarasota and the Unitarian Universalist of Lakewood Ranch. To all of our members, to all of our visitors, you are most welcome. Now, please pay attention to some of the announcements of some of the activities that are happening this week in our church. Thank you, Don, for that beautiful prelude. Our visitors especially I'd like to speak to for a moment. We'd like you to visit and explore the website of our church. It's pretty good. It keeps up to date on a lot of our life together as a congregation. There is a special place for visitors, a visitor center, and we would invite you to consider registering there on the virtual guest book. Register there with your email, and we will send you our newsletter, and through that you will learn even more about all the activities in the congregation. They are virtual, and so once you are interested and you learn, then you need to get the access to participate through Zoom most of the time. While you're there, everybody, members and visitors, there is a donate button, a basket. It's visible when you open that home page on the website, and we encourage you to use that and give generously to the congregation to support the work and the ministry we are about. There will be no coffee hour after today's service, so I wanted to make sure you knew that. And please continue to join with us in a spirit of fellowship virtually as we worship together. We come together today to renew our faith in the holiness, goodness, and beauty of life. We come together to reaffirm the way of the open mind and the full heart, to rekindle the flame of memory and hope, to rekindle the vision of an earth made fair, with all her people one. And now we light this flame in the spirit of the sixth principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Join us now in the opening hymn for the beauty of the earth. If you have a hymnal at home, number 21.
Good morning. I add my welcome to Bud's, and good to be together, even though virtually. During our time for centering this morning, let's take a few moments to acknowledge our concerns and disappointments with the surge in COVID infections and with having to postpone reopening for worship next Sunday. We thought the pandemic was winding down. We thought we were further along on the road to normalcy. We thought we could be gathering as a community here in this sacred space next week. We planned to celebrate, to rejoice and be glad. It is disappointing. It is frustrating, disheartening. It has been a traumatic year and a half, and we are so keenly aware that it isn't over yet. Not only we ourselves, but the whole world is experiencing trauma. Trauma, at its root, is an experience that shatters our experience of reality. Trauma breaks us open. It breaks us apart. It causes a rupture in our understanding of ourselves and of how the world works. Trauma has a physiological response that lives in our bodies. Each of us experiences it in our own unique ways. Take a moment now to reflect on what has been traumatic for you and where it might be lodged or located in your body. Place your hand wherever it might hold the discomfort that might be trauma caused or trauma aggravated. Place your hand there. Breathe healing energy into that place and hold it for a second. And release that tension as you breathe out. I searched all week for hopeful words. I wanted to tell you something definitive about things getting better. I came up short. No one knows what comes next. I have no fixes to suggest. The best I can offer is a balm or two to soothe our troubled souls. Gratitude is a balm for the troubled soul. Consider these words by Melanie Beattie. Gratitude unlocks the fullness of life. It turns what we have into enough and more. It turns denial into acceptance, chaos into order, confusion into clarity. It can turn a meal into a feast, a house into a home, a stranger into a friend. Gratitude makes sense of our past, brings peace for today, and creates a vision for tomorrow. What are you grateful for today? And our connections are a balm to companion us through these times. Albert Schweitzer has written, at times our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who have lighted the flame within us. In community, we both give and receive sparks. We are not alone. In the days and weeks ahead, for now and in our continuing trauma and uncertainty, may we remember to support one another and to practice gratitude every day. And let us remember the one statement that is universally and always true. This too shall pass. So may it be. Amen. And now let us be together in silence.
This week we think about some of the few essential things about Unitarian Universalism and by extension in our own lives. And so we will offer together a reading that I invite you to join us responsibly. The reading is by Vincent Silliman. I will do the blue background lead, and if you will join Beth and Bud in the green background response. Let religion be to us life and joy.
Let it be a voice of renewing challenge to the best we have and may be. Let it be a call to generous action.
Let religion be to us a dissatisfaction with things that are, which bid us serve more eagerly the true and right.
Let it be the sorrow that opens for us the way of sympathy, understanding, and service to suffering humanity.
Let religion be to us the wonder and lure of that which is only partly known and understood.
An eye that glories in nature's majesty and beauty, and a heart that rejoices in deeds of kindness and of courage.
Let religion be to us security and serenity because of its truth and beauty, and a heart that rejoices in deeds of kindness and of courage.
Let it be to us hope and purpose and the discovery of opportunities to express our best through daily task.
Let religion be to us the security and serenity because of the truth, beauty, and because of the enduring worth and power of the loyalty which it engenders.
Let it be to us hope and purpose and the discovering of opportunities to express our best through daily tasks.
Religion, uniting us with all that is admirable in human beings everywhere.
Holding before our eyes a prospect of the better life for humankind, which each may help to make actual.
May we now reflect for a few moments in music. Unitarian Universalist Touchstones. Early in my ministry, I worked as a hospice chaplain, and one day I was asked to make a visit to someone that was not on my normal caseload. And so I went to see a woman named Kate, a 60-something-year-old, in stage 4 ovarian cancer. And she was taken care of mostly by her much younger daughter, the youngest daughter in the family, Amy. And so as I was trying to get to know them quickly and see how I could best help them, I asked, what is it that you hold on to in this time when things get especially tough? And they both looked at each other for a few moments in total silence. And then Kate stood up with her IV stand in hand, and she walked into her bedroom. I looked at Amy with curious eyes and thought, well, she may have just left the interview altogether. I'm not sure what's happening. But a moment later, she came back into the room, and I could tell that she had something in her hand. And as she got closer, I could see what it was. She was holding in her hand a baseball. And just as I was thinking that this was going to be a conversation about what a baseball fanatic she was and how this helped her in difficult times, and I wasn't sure what I would be able to do with that conversation, I looked over at Amy, and she had the most meaningful, wistful look in her eyes. And she said simply to her mom, "That is not the baseball, is it?" And her mother smiled, and the two of them just for a moment held each other's glance. And then Amy turned to me and said, "So, when I was in 2nd grade, late in the afternoon, my mom returned from a long day at the bank. This was after she had just divorced my father, and it was a time when money and time itself was very tight. And she found me sobbing on my bed, and when I was able to get control of myself, I talked to her about the gut-wrenching humiliation that I had suffered in gym class that day. We had begun the softball unit, and it turns out I was horrible. I'd never actually even touched a softball before that moment. And we had to stand out on the field and throw the softball back and forth to each other to practice, and I missed it every time, and at least half of the time when I went to throw it, it ended up maybe 3 feet in front of me and at least twice behind me when I let go of it at the wrong time. And I cried because I felt so inadequate. So she said, my mother let me cry for several minutes on her lap, gently stroking my hair, and then she said, "Amy, meet me out and back in just a few minutes." And so a few minutes later, we were in the backyard, and she had in her hand a baseball. And I thought to myself, I didn't even know we owned a baseball. But she began by having us stand a couple of feet from each other, and she lightly tossed me the ball. And in a moment of teenage outrage, I said to her, "Mom, even I'm good enough to catch a ball from 2 feet away." My mom laughed and said, "Now take a big step backward, and I will do the same." And once again, she said, "Now, Amy, throw the ball back to me." And she caught it, and she had us step back and back. And after a few minutes, I was several feet away from her, and I noticed for the first time that my mother had taken time only enough to change her shoes, but otherwise was in the same outfit that she had worn all day at the bank for those long, long hours. And even as self-absorbed as I was as a little girl, I realized that she had worked all day and that she had to be exhausted. And then we took another step back, and it occurred to me that my mom was hardly a great baseball player herself, and there were probably 1,000 things for her to do that day. and so many things to worry about without her being out there helping me throw this stupid ball. And we threw it back and forth and took a step back until at the end we were all the way to the limit of our backyard, much further than we had been during that gym class. And my mother looked at me so intently as she held the ball, and she took a big back throw and let it go as hard as she could. And as it came my way, I realized that she could care less whether I caught that ball. She would think no less of me as a human being, nor love me any less. And so as that ball came toward me, I realized whatever happened next didn't matter. For that ball was carried through the air by the power of unconditional love. So I kept that ball in my room for years, all the way through junior high and high school, and even off to college, to remind me of how important it was to remember at my core how valuable I was, and whatever failures or difficulties that people loved me. And I guess I must have lost track of the actual ball, because it eventually became the idea that the ball represented. And her mother said, well, it was about then, when I discovered it cleaning out your room, that it became a touchstone for me. And as I continued through my life, and especially in these last few months when I've been so sick, the ball reminded me of our relationship and all relationships, and the importance of time well spent. And so for a few moments, I sat with the three of us, in silence. And that story, and having a softball, a baseball in my office, became a sort of touchstone for me as well. So touchstones can be many different things. For this morning, I want to concentrate on touchstones as images, stories, ideals, and values, things that are important to us either as individuals or sometimes essential to us as communities, people of faith. Basic, few things that we choose, that when the going gets rough or when we feel adrift, that we can turn to. We may not touch them literally, but as if they were something tangible, they call us back to a moment and to an idea and to a story that helps us know who we are. There are many such stories and ideals for Unitarian Universalism. Almost all of our original ideas come from theological concepts that differed from the norm and from the orthodox. And as they formed over time, those differences were not only unacceptable, they were often persecuted. And so the touchstones that have formed in our tradition have often been put together from great difficulty and were used in times of great difficulty to remember what is essential. There are so many different touchstones that we could discover together. Let me just think with you for a few minutes about a few. Unitarians focused on the sacred as a uniting force, not something that was broken into many parts. For them, God is, was, and will be always one. And for hundreds of years, Unitarians revered Jesus. And in Jesus, many of them saw divinity. But most of all, they saw the exemplar of a well-lived life. A life that sought to continue that godlike legacy of unifying, bringing together. And religion in itself comes from the word that means that which binds us together. So that sense of calling together in unity has been essential to us from the beginning. And in this day and time, another touchstone that I believe is powerful from our Unitarian forebears was the conviction that deep within ourselves and each other is the potential to find the sacred energy, the sacred core that exists in all of our lives, and draw upon that power. Finding that core and bringing it to fruition is, in many ways, the essence of the spiritual journey. That journey towards the very core meanings of our life. For the 19th century Unitarian, William Ellery Channing, it was summed up in the word character. How is it that you are living? What are you doing for the world, not necessarily to the world? How are you living and striving for your deeper potential in your own life? And a greater sense of unity of all creation that our forebears brought is more important now in this divisive time than ever. How do we understand ourselves connected to the world and to everyone in it? One of our modern Unitarian Universalists, Dr. Charles Jacob, took seriously first his own call to discover what in his life would be work that was worth doing. But for him, it was essential that that calling bring a sense of deep connection and unity between all people. And so, since 1993, he has been about awakening people's consciousness to the issues of what he calls modern slavery. Jacobs is the founder and president of the American Anti-Slavery Group in Boston. And modern slavery and human trafficking may be used synonymously, but this organization chooses the term modern slavery to explicitly connect its historical precedents and the long-held biases that often still perpetuate the practice. He defines modern slavery as people who are forced to work under the threat of violence for little or no pay. And he offers some disheartening statistics. There are now at least 40 million people that are in that circumstance, modern slaves today. And at least for the last decade, there are more people in slavery than in any other time in human history. And that 40,000 is larger than the current population of Canada. And according to the CIA, about 50,000 people every year are brought into the United States to be slaves. Slavery, Jacob says, is the stepchild often of the human rights movement, and it has been very slow to take off as something that even the most progressive of organizations has been willing to look at honestly. He often says that in his work, he has found in the United States an abolitionist trio that is very powerful. And he says that it constitutes primarily Jewish people, African Americans, and Unitarian Universalists. He says about Unitarian Universalism, it is the abolitionist church. He points out that in our early history, we were dedicated to abolitionism. And he recounts the work of the Reverend Theodore Parker, who took a stand against slavery, and an even more bold stance against Southern slave catchers when they came to Boston. He recounts that he took a group of Universalist men to a hotel where the slave catchers were lodging and surrounded them and attempted to intimidate them. He told them that they had better go for their own safety back and leave the slaves in that town free. And according to the story, the slaves looked into Parker's eyes and at the men and chose that night to go back home. One part of our legacy is the way that we choose uniting and connective forces and bring them forward to the greatest good. On the Universalist side, we believed in the loving nature of God, that God loves creation so deeply It is not in the nature of the sacred to be punishing. We live our lives as a reflection of that love, not in fear of some eternal punishment. Viola Luizzo, in 1964, began attending the First Unitarian Universalist Church in Detroit, Michigan. And there she found a faith that matched both her ideals and her longing to be of service. Luizzo, along with millions of other Americans, had seen on television the horrors that were happening in the South. And that night, as she was making her rounds, saying goodnight to her 5 children, she watched tenderly as they drifted off to sleep. And she thought about the kind of world she wanted them to grow up in. And so, first, because of her love of children, her children, and over time, the love of the people that she began to get to know in the civil rights movement, she decided to go to Selma. Even after she had received the news that Reverend James Reeb, one of our ministers, was attacked on the street by a group of whites on March 9th and died 2 days later. As she attended his memorial, she decided that it was the time for her to really take action. And so she decided to go to Selma and work there. She helped with voter registration and really whatever was necessary. On March 26, she and Leroy Moten, a young African-American man, volunteered to drive civil rights workers to the airport. As they returned from the airport, a car full of Klansmen, one of whom was an FBI informant, spotted Luizzo and Moten stopped at a traffic light in Selma. And they followed their car in pursuit for 20 miles while she attempted to outrun her pursuers. And together they sang at the top of their lungs, "We shall overcome." And about halfway between Selma and Montgomery, the 4 men pulled up their car next to hers and shot at the car. Luizzo was hit in the head and killed instantly. And at her memorial, Martin Luther King talked about the importance of love in our lives. So we have many things that help us understand as Touchstones who we are. I believe we turn to that which unifies us with all things, the universe, the planet, each other. We have our sense of being called to connective service. When we are at our best, we step outside of our comfort zone, outside of the walls of our congregations and our homes, and we meet people where they are and do the important work. We have a long sense of the legacy of healing and loving service, and that love is radical, and we return to that touchstone again and again. And most of all, our forebears gave us the touchstone of courage, that when something is important, we will risk much in its service. It has happened over and over again. It happened with our Siding with Love campaign when in 2008, after the shooting in Knoxville at the Unitarian Universalist congregation, we realized that it was the connection between faith communities that made that possible to move forward and for there to be healing. And so Siding with Love became a movement that diversified the ways that we connect and heal in the world. It's true in the story of our chalice, which originally in World War II was a symbol of how we were in Europe meeting people who were in danger in the Nazi regime and bringing about healing and love by helping those people survive and connect. Maybe those aren't the words that you connect with, that are your touchstones. I invite you to take a moment to think about what it is that you turn to, maybe in your own life, maybe as a part of this congregation that is enduring and in some way touches deeply what matters to you. It is important always, but especially in this time when such division continues in our country, when there is so much anxiety around the pandemic continuing and changing all of the time, for us to understand our particular role. Secular progressives don't seem to understand that while politics is about how we are going to make the world better, progressive religion like ours tells us why it's necessary to work for change and what better might look like when we get there. Liberal faith traditions offer the essential metaphors and worldview that helps us understand what's essential. The frames that give our dream shape and meaning. We, more than ever, have an invaluable role to play in helping our movement and this country set its values and priorities, to find their own touchstones, to understand where we are in the larger scheme, and gauge whether or not we are succeeding in moving towards a world that is worthy of our connection and love. As we journey through this month, may we explore more about what Unitarian Universalism means now and what it asks of us. So may it be. I invite you to join us in our closing hymn, hymn number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath.
Just as long as I have breath, I must answer yes to life. Though with pain I make my way, still with hope I live each day. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to life. Just as long as vision lasts, I must answer yes to truth. In my dream and in my dark, always that elusive spark. If they ask what I did well, tell them I said yes to truth. Just as long as my heart beats, I must answer yes to love. Disappointment pierced me through, still I kept on loving you. If they ask what I did best, tell them I said yes to love.
As we prepare to extinguish our chalice here, I hope you will do the same at home. Norman Naylor wrote, "Reminded that we are part of and participant of the universe, let us go forth from the quiet of this hour, encouraged to strive towards faithfulness in the best of ourselves and others, and in the whole creation. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of wisdom, the warmth of human love, or the fire of our commitment." May you have a great week, and we will see you back here next weekend.